Greetings! In part 1 of this series, I gave you a fundamental overview of the main players in South Africa's political scene. In this episode, I will try to explain some of the reasons for why we find ourselves in the situation we are currently facing. Before I begin, I must warn you that some of what I am about to say will be difficult to hear, because modern minds have been conditioned to avoid, like the plague, any thought or argumentation which even approaches sounding like it might be racist. But unfortunately, if I am to give you an honest perspective of what goes on in this country, it is my duty to face difficult facts. If someone from outside of South Africa spends any time looking into our failing economy and the blatant corruption that characterizes much of public life, the first question they generally ask is how things were allowed to get this bad and how they've been going this way for so long. If you were to ask this of our political leaders, the answer they would most likely give is that the current suffering faced by most South Africans is the result of the ongoing inequality created by the legacy of apartheid. Although I do not deny that as a political system, apartheid has severe ramifications which still play out even decades after its fall, I do not believe that the majority of what we are dealing with can be laid at its feet. From my perspective, many, if not most of the problems we have to live with on a daily basis boil down to the fact that South Africa is a democracy in name only. The practical reality is that outdated tribal culture and values are far more potent and active in determining the choices and actions of many people in this country every day. For a large section of the South African population, when they take issue with the ANC's blatant corruption and inefficiency, they do not settle it or try to remedy it through civil discourse or logical reasoning. The sad fact is that many South Africans feel the only avenue through which their voices can be heard is one of violence, which is why that is often their first reaction to displeasure or dissatisfaction with life. In South Africa's modern era, the use of violence and physical force to settle social issues dates back well before the fall of apartheid, where the ANC, its followers and its supporters were quite comfortable in using violence and hurting innocent people to achieve their stated aim of a supposedly democratic society. Whether or not the use of such violence under those conditions was morally justified is still a matter of historical debate, but the fact remains that since 1994, that attitude and comfort level with the use of violence against fellow South Africans has not gone away. In fact, I would argue that it has only increased. Politically speaking, the ANC has played a very clever game because they have created an environment in which citizens feel that it is permissible to express their frustration and anger through violence and destruction, so long as they do not channel that rage in an appropriate way come election time. Essentially, it seems to me, from personal experience, that the ANC does not give a damn how many schools, universities, or other public buildings are burned down by angry mobs, as long as those same mobs keep voting for them every 4 years. The ANC maintains this dynamic by constantly reminding the public that it is the party of liberation and Nelson Mandela, as well as being liberal in its distribution of food packages, t-shirts, and sometimes even hard cash during election cycles. Through a steady diet of propaganda, the ANC has also been able to convince a large portion of the voting populace that to vote for any party other than them would bring about the return of apartheid. If, as a listener, this narrative sounds silly or preposterous to you, and you wonder how anyone could actually believe it, then bear in mind that the very fact that you are able to listen to my words right now means that you are most likely in possession of a much more developed understanding of global politics and the spirit of our age than the average South African. The ANC is fully aware that its social influence does not rest with urban, middle-class, educated South Africans, but instead with those living in poverty, still trapped beneath the yoke of tribal expectation. And in my honest opinion, they work very hard to keep it that way. With that, we have reached the end of part 2. As always, if you appreciate my content, then please consider supporting me via Patreon, PayPal, or by ordering something from my merch store. For now, farewell.